Hi, and welcome to Journey Forward with Jory Rose, where you will gain insights, tools, and inspiration to get unstuck and live your best life. Jory is a licensed marriage and family therapist with a passion for helping people cultivate awareness and authenticity so they can show up fully in all aspects of their life. And now, here's Jory.
Hey everyone, and welcome back. I am so happy that Shannon Jackson has come on the show today, and I know that we're going to have an insightful and viable conversation. And I've been following Shannon on Instagram, so if you guys don't, be sure to check out her Instagram post, and then we'll talk so much more about it. But Shannon, welcome. Thank you so much for sharing part of your day with me. And please introduce yourself and share with our audience who you are and how have you gotten to be doing the work that you're doing? What's your journey?
Yeah, thank you. So first off, just thank you for having me on. I'm so excited to talk to you and your community. So this is such a big question, right? Like,
Let's just dive right in.
Right. How do you summarize? So today I am an anxiety recovery coach. And to say those words out loud is insane to me because I used to be the person that was convinced that I would never have a life that wasn't consumed by anxiety and panic. So I struggled with anxiety, panic disorder, and agoraphobia for 15 long years. And I just want to put the disclaimer now, right? Like, you don't have to struggle for that long. Your journey does not have to be that long. It does not have to be that hard. Mine unfortunately was, and this is why I do the work that I do today, so that people aren't struggling for that long and it isn't so hard. And just so people know, like, you're not alone and you're not crazy and you're not broken.
I think I think we could end there and we could give enough value of what people need to hear. It doesn't have to be this hard.
Yeah.
You're not alone. There's nothing wrong with you. You can get through it. Like, I think if we're in the middle of anxiety and knew that to actually be true, our anxiety in and of itself would dial itself down just a little bit.
For sure. For sure. But, right when you're not in such a logical state of mind, you just take that anxiety and you run with it. And so I did that for a very long time. So I started experiencing panic attacks when I was a teenager. I had a little bit of an idea of what they were because my mom had shared a little with me that she had struggled with panic and agoraphobia when she was younger. And so I had heard of it before. It wasn't, that story of it happened and I had no idea what it was. I mean, I definitely felt like, oh my gosh, what is this? And I thought that I was having like an asthma attack. It was, the typical symptoms. I felt like a tingling run through my entire body. I felt super anxious, panicky, like, oh my gosh, I'm so hot right now. I feel lightheaded. What is happening? And so I remember I was actually at a track meet and it was right before a race started. And I literally had to walk off the line. I was just like freaking out internally, trying to figure out what was happening to me and just trying not to feel what I was feeling. And I did the typical thing of like walking into the bathroom. I just looked in the mirror and started saying like that you need to make this stop. Like this can't happen right now. Like, I don't know what is happening. And I just started pouring water on my face and like, it wasn't helpful. And after that, I started having panic all the time. And it was like on a daily basis. And then it developed into so many fears. And one of my strongest fears was the fear of being trapped in a place, a situation that I couldn't, I convinced myself I couldn't easily get out of. And if I experienced panic, that was it. Like my whole world would crumble. Yeah. And so
how old were you when this started? High school, you said?
Yeah, I was 16, 17. And I mean, of course, your normal human reaction, your response is like, let me protect myself. And so I started to do anything and everything to not experience panic. So I would avoid, I would, run at the slightest bit of anxiety, because I didn't want it to get to that level, I was constantly seeking reassurance, calling my mom, calling, my close loved ones, help me, talk to me. I am on the verge of experiencing panic. And I just, like many people do, you seek out anything that people might give you as a way of getting through it, overcoming it, not having them anymore. I tried like anxiety relieving gummies and like all these different breathing techniques and mindfulness techniques. And it was just like, I felt like.
Did you go into therapy for it?
Oh, yeah. So thankfully, of course, my mom knew what was happening and got me into therapy. I would say probably within 6 months to a year. I was pretty hesitant about it because I felt like, no, like, let me try to figure this out. I can probably figure it out myself. But yeah, I got into therapy. I was in therapy for, 10 plus years and had, different waves of it would really hit me and I'd struggle for months and then I'd be okay. And then I'd struggle. And yeah, so like I said, I mean, one of the biggest things that I struggled with was driving anxiety, like that for me. And it wasn't just driving. It wasn't even really driving was the thing. It was being in a car, being, sort of trapped, like convincing myself, if you experience panic, this is so unsafe. You can't just get out. Like, what are you going to do? And so it wasn't just cars. It was planes, trains, boats, like any form of transportation. So yeah, I didn't really travel. I like restricted places and situations that I'd put myself in, and going anywhere and everywhere became very, very hard. Just driving day to day, like to school. And then when I began working, driving to work and sitting in meetings and going out with friends, like stuff that used to be so comfortable and peaceful were suddenly incredibly hard. And every step of it was filled with worry and anticipation and panic.
It's so debilitating.
Yes. Yeah. And of course, it's like when you're so in it, you feel like you're the only one, right? Like it's so debilitating that you're like, you can't even wrap your brain around other people experience this. You really convince yourself like there is no way, especially
no one understands me. No one gets it,
Right. All of those narratives. And I totally bought into them. I really didn't talk about what I was struggling with anyone aside from my family members, my close family members. A couple of close friends sort of knew in general, but didn't know like to the extent of my fears. And so, of course, I think one of my natural instincts kind of was like, I've just got to keep living. I've got to keep doing these things. And I'm in school and like and then I was in college and then I was working and I'm like, I have to keep doing all this stuff. Like I remember going to my first psychiatrist to talk about the potential of using medication. And I sat down on her couch. She went through the entire evaluation and then was like, Shannon, I don't know how you're going to work, how you're going to school. Most people in your situation wouldn't be doing these things. And that for me was like the first eye opener of like, whoa, like I am struggling with something much bigger than I am, of course, giving it credit for. Like I didn't want to believe it was so hard and like so bad. And it was really that she gave me sort of that validation of like, no, this is really hard stuff. And what you're going through and like what you're, the expectations that you have on yourself and just like telling yourself you have to keep doing all this stuff. It wasn't registering like how hard it was every day and what I was up against. And I wasn't cutting myself any sort of slack for any of it. I was just like, nope, you got to just keep doing everything.
keep pushing through, just forge ahead and try to limit your exposure to the things that might increase it or activate it.
Right. Yes.
But ironically, I would imagine by not giving it space, it actually probably grew.
1,000%.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head, right? I didn't talk about it. I tried to push it away. I fought it. any time that I felt the slightest bit anxious, and it wasn't even just anxiety, it was excitement. It was, I could have been happy, and like any emotion automatically led me to anxiety. And yeah.
For the people who are listening who maybe feel that but aren't sure if that's what they're experiencing, could you describe what that felt like in your body?
Yeah, like what the anxiety felt like. So for me, a lot of it manifested in digestive symptoms and mental, like the racing thoughts, the dread, the constant fear that something bad was going to happen. Like I always carried that worry of the worst case scenarios, the things that you want to avoid. Those are the things that are going to happen. They're inevitable. But back to the digestive stuff, I was constant, if I felt a little bit of anxiety, or even if I wasn't anxious and my stomach started to feel a little bit upset or rumbly, I would instantly convince myself, oh, you're anxious. You can't feel this way. This is going to lead to panic. And, I would have just stomach cramps, stomach pain, nausea. And, one of the things that I swore that I'd never talk about to like the people that I'm closest with, never mind now announcing this to many, many people. But I struggled with toilet anxiety. And because I always had these digestive symptoms that crept in with anxiety, I developed this fear around having to go to the bathroom and not having a bathroom be accessible. And, talk about all the scenarios and the stories.
Shannon, there's
that go on.
So much of what you're saying that I can relate to. It's crazy. Yeah.
Oh, it and you now, talking about it, it's so easy and it doesn't bother me. But back then, to tell anyone, even my partner, who is now my husband, it took me years to share that with him, that I didn't even tell my mom for a long time because, and it still makes me emotional. You can still hear it in my voice today that to tell somebody, I worry all the time about pooping my pants. Like, who worries about that? And I convinced myself nobody did. Nobody has this problem. And I can assure you, if you're listening right now and you're like, nobody struggles, so many people struggle with toilet anxiety.
People struggle. Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So it manifested in those ways. It also sometimes manifested in depersonalization, just like feeling really hot, feeling sweaty, feeling lightheaded. I had the fears of, what if I pass out? And then coupled with, especially while I'm driving, while I'm in these, higher stakes situations. For me, I did get sometimes some of the racing heart, some of that, but mine was more really centered around digestive stuff, the thoughts, the all-consuming, like something bad is going to happen any second of every day.
It feels possible. I'm curious, was there anything in your life or in your family history that bad things did happen?
Yeah, both. So, along with my mom sharing with me that she struggled with panic and agoraphobia when she was around 20 for a couple of years. Anxiety like runs in my family. I feel like this is, what a lot of people say, but my uncle struggled with anxiety, OCD. My grandfather, my great grandmother struggled with severe agoraphobia her entire life. So I remember hearing these things, when I was younger, when I first started to struggle and thinking, I am doomed. Like, with all of this genetic component, if it's an actual thing,
genes.
Right?
How do I get out of that? If it's been in my family and in my family history, then I guess I just have to accept it and deal with it. And this is just who I am.
Right. Even though, and like I know a lot of people don't have this, even though I had my mom every day telling me, this is something that I struggled with, but I don't struggle with it anymore. It was a couple of years and I have not had a panic attack in decades. And even though I had my mom, cheering me on and telling me realistically that I could overcome it, I never believed it. I didn't believe it for a really long time because I convinced myself like, nope, I was special. I was different. Like I was not the person that was capable of overcoming it. And then talking about, bad experiences, I grew up in a household with a parent who had very volatile behaviors and was very emotionally disconnected. And so thank goodness I had my mom, on the other hand, who was very nurturing and who talked about emotions and, did her best to display emotions and teach me how to manage emotions in a healthy way. But then, of course, I had my father, on the other hand, who didn't know how to manage his emotions.
Right.
And that unpredictability, that part of me that felt really unsafe in my own environment, in my own home, of course, developed into some of the anxiety that I experienced as I got older. And then to make things worse, right? I got into a really unhealthy relationship when I was probably 16, 17. So right around the time
right at the height of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Right at the height of it. And of course I saw this boy as like a savior, like this is the best relationship and this is amazing. And he was just very, very unhealthy. And it was a very toxic relationship. And there was, emotional abuse and verbal and some physical at the end. And that relationship, enduring the amount of trauma that I did, only made my journey with panic so much harder. So yeah, it was kind of like the I had it all, right?
That's a lot, Shannon. It's a lot.
Yeah. And then I would say, I don't understand why I'm struggling with this stuff. Like, why am I struggling with anxiety and panic? Yeah. And now to look back, it's like, oh my goodness. Yeah.
So how did you get through it? Other than, having a psychiatrist tell you, wow, I can't believe you're actually functioning at the level that you are. What steps did you take to really help get through it?
Right. As I had my mom, she was like such a saving grace. I was in therapy and it was helpful. It was really helpful to start learning some of my behaviors and taking some accountability for just some of the unhealthy behaviors, unhealthy choices, the things that were, just reinforcing the anxiety, but I didn't understand it at the time, not understanding that when I felt anxious, just immediately seeking out reassurance from others wasn't the best technique. Instead, allowing myself to sort of work up my tolerance for feeling the discomfort and not immediately jumping to, I need help, save me. So yeah, therapy was very insightful because it started to teach me, it helped me to recognize those behaviors of, oh, okay, like that actually where I'm trying to help myself and keep myself safe. These things, worked for me for some time, but they're not working anymore. They're not.
And I love that you said that. And I'm writing down some notes. I'm like, oh, I want to be able to talk about this more. But we so often, I think, develop strategies, right, that do help momentarily.
Oh yeah.
And we get so over attached to those strategies and don't recognize that they actually aren't working anymore. And in fact, they're doing the opposite. Yeah. But one of the things I want to go back to really quick, because I think this is like huge. And I just want to kind of give it that space for people to really hear and let it sink in, that to be able to work at developing the tolerance for being uncomfortable or being in that level of discomfort without immediately trying to fix it, solve it, get it reassured, and have it be done externally. Like that, to me, right there is so much of the work. Can I just let it be okay that I'm not okay? Knowing the more I accept that I'm not okay, the quicker the not okayness, that's a word.
Yeah.
The quicker that's going to pass. That, it's not the thing, it's about how we relate to the thing.
100%.
And so it's the story we're telling ourselves. It's in Buddhism, it's the first dart and the second dart. The first dart is just what you're experiencing. The second dart is all the darts you're throwing at yourself of, why is this happening? Why me? Why this? Why now? The comparison mind, the judgments, the shame, the embarrassment, the guilt, all of it exasperates the initial thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, just being able to sit and be able to name, wow, like this is really uncomfortable. I'm noticing like my body is really tight, or this pit in my stomach, or this tension in my chest, or this, inability to take a deep breath and just be with that, even just for like stretching it out.
Yeah, it's so hard though. It's so hard because, like, we talked about those strategies that you develop. You do often get short-term relief from them. Like, I call my mom, okay, I feel a bit better. I get myself out of this situation, I feel a bit better. I don't do that thing, I feel good. So, these strategies that you do, they do work in the short term, but they work against you in the long term. And so, yeah, working myself up to be able to feel discomfort and notice I can feel this level of discomfort and like my whole world doesn't crumble began to be really huge for me. And telling myself, things like, I'm feeling super uncomfortable, but this discomfort doesn't equal danger, because I was always convincing myself these feelings, these sensations, these symptoms, these thoughts, this situation equals danger. And I was always,
I love that.
Yeah, that was
Discomfort
huge.
does not equal danger. It feels like it, and we think it is, but it's not actually danger.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's like those, those high stakes scenarios where you convince yourself, like, for instance, for me, driving was really hard. And so if I came up to traffic, that was like the ultimate, right? Like, now not only am I stuck in my car, but now I'm stuck in traffic. And so I would immediately start on that. Okay, now you're feeling, and now this is really scary and this is unsafe, and that you have to get the heck out. And taking a minute instead to slow down, to like take a couple of deep breaths and to say, okay, this is anxiety. I'm feeling super anxious, but this discomfort that I'm feeling doesn't mean that I'm not safe. It doesn't mean that I'm actually in danger. And resisting, picking up the phone, resisting like taking one of these gummies that was probably like literal fruit snacks, who knows, but like resisting doing these things really helped me to be able to start to realize the power that I had within myself, and that I didn't need to look outward, that I didn't need to try to find and figure out and problem solve my way out, because essentially what I was always trying to do was problem solve my way out of feeling. And you really can't do that. It's like not possible.
Well, and something you said earlier highlights that as well. Like, you can't spot reduce emotions, right? So if we're trying to not feel, we're actually not feeling the ones that we want to be feeling. I don't want to just call it the good stuff or the bad stuff, because I don't like the polarity of that, but the pleasurable emotions, the happiness, the joy, the contentment, the excitement, right? All of those things, when we're afraid of feeling, we cut ourselves off from all of it.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I got so good at that. And I think a lot of people, when you struggle with anxiety and panic, you get really good at not feeling. And then you have those waves of immense feeling. And then you're like, what the heck is happening? Why is this happening? And it's like, well, you've been resisting and fighting feeling for so long. And your brain's going to do what brains do. Like, they produce emotions and you're meant to feel them. You're not meant to push them away. You're not meant to try to like problem solve your way out of them. But that's really hard.
And when the brain does what it does, it also produces chemical responses in our body that feel certain sensations that if we're not accurate in our own awareness and label, we misinterpret.
Right. Absolutely. Everything's anxiety. Everything's danger. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so much easier said than done.
Right.
As we both know, because I the listeners, I've shared a bit of this before, but I grew up with a lot of fear and anxiety as well. I feel like I kind of joke about it, that fear and anxiety was handed to me on a silver platter. And there was a lot of trauma in my family and generations going back. And so for me, a lot of my anxiety was reality based. Like, worst case scenarios actually did happen in my family. And so I believe that my anxiety was justified because it wasn't like a what if. It was, no, that actually happened. My mom's parents were killed in a car accident when my mom was 16, and she was the only survivor of the accident. They were hit head on by a drunk driver. And so if I was a kid and she was 5 minutes late picking me up somewhere, like, I was convinced she was dead on the side of the road, because like that happened to her parents. So like, it wasn't out of the realm of possibility that could happen, and I didn't have full on agoraphobia, but I would have a lot of claustrophobia. And I've had to really work at overcoming that fear of being stuck. And I need to like knock on wood somewhere. But like my biggest fear, which I still have that I'm not so great at getting through yet, although I have to give myself credit, but I still hold the fear, is elevators.
Yeah.
I hate elevators. And I was just in Italy. You and I were chatting that you saw that. And we were in Venice and we went to this bar or this restaurant that was like the third floor of this old hotel in Venice. And Shannon, I kid you not, this was the smallest elevator I've ever been in my life. All four walls I was pretty much touching.
Oh my goodness.
Like, if you were an overweight person, I honestly don't know how people would fit in this elevator. I'm a pretty small person. I'm not even 5'2". Like, and there's a picture of me because my fiance was in the elevator with me and even he was uncomfortable. And I was like flicking him off with he was taking a picture of me because I was such in distress over, I was literally like the photo of me, I am touching 3 of the 4 walls just by standing.
Yeah.
And it's a practice of, okay, there's still air in here. I can still breathe. You know, worst case scenario, I have my phone. There's like, I have to go through all the checklists of the reality checking of why I can be safe, even if the worst case happened. And so I think it's a reminder that we can have these really big anxieties, but like they can be super small, but still feel debilitating.
For sure.
You know? And like, I have a hierarchy of which elevators are better, like parking garage elevators. In my mind are like the lowest caliber of elevators. I don't know why, but like the mind isn't logical.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've overcome so much of my anxiety and fear, but like I'm still human, right?
Yeah.
I can understand like this logically doesn't always make sense to me.
Yeah. There is like so much goodness in what you just shared, because I think that many people have also too had those worst case scenarios happen. And when you do, it's that your brain does the human thing of jumping to, it's happened before, like this is going to happen again because, you know, it's possible, it's probable. That's not reality, right? But like your brain immediately jumps to that. And then you start problem solving for like, okay, that if that happens again, like this is what I'm going to do. And like, and then those stories start to build and you really begin to attach to them and like keep this narrative going. And like what you said, you really have to slow it down and change the narrative and really pay attention to what you're telling yourself, because that feeds the anxiety, of course.
Yes. Oh, it does. And I used to really not like to fly. And many years ago, I had flown to New York. I was by myself for a retreat at the Omega Institute. And when I was coming home from that retreat, the flight was delayed 5 hours, in which we had to sit on the plane on the tarmac they let us off for maybe like 20 minutes at one point. But the reason for the delay was not only was there a summer storm in New York, so the airport kept opening and closing, there was a hard landing of a plane at LaGuardia. And so all the LaGuardia flights were being diverted to JFK. And I was on a JetBlue flight, which has live TV. So everyone around me was watching the live news of like this hard landing because the wheels didn't come down. And like normally I would have been in a full-blown panic attack. Get me off this plane. I'm renting a car and I'm driving back to California. And it was, you know, it was a real practice of sitting with, I will not worry about what I can't control. Okay, so what can I control? I can breathe. And for me, it's the repetition of these mantras almost of recognizing I'm worrying about things that are not within my control.
Yeah.
But I actually have a lot more control over how I respond.
Yeah.
And I had otherwise given myself credit for.
Right. Oh, that's so good. One of the biggest things that I always say was like, anxiety was never the problem. It was how I responded to it.
Yes.
And if I could have gone back, right, and told my like 17-year-old self that, it probably wouldn't have been very enlightening because I was 17, but it would have been incredibly helpful, because I think that's such a piece that people miss is it's okay for the anxiety to be there. It's okay for the anxious thoughts, the symptoms, the sensation, all of it, the discomfort, but how you respond to it is so key. And, I obviously don't want to lose sight too. It's not just, I think people get confused with like, okay, in order to overcome this anxiety and panic and all my fears, like I just have to do exposures. And it's like, yeah, that's a really helpful bit of recovery. You obviously have to face the stuff that's scary and make it less scary, but there's also many other things that you have to learn. And like, the way that you talk to yourself and the way you respond to the stories, and developing tons and tons of self-compassion and mindfulness is obviously really helpful, and not just using it in those moments where you're so desperate and like trying to make yourself not anxious. So like all of these things are a part of it too, right? It's not just about working up your tolerance for discomfort, although that's really important. There's loads of other aspects of recovery that are super helpful too.
Yeah. And so now, as being an anxiety recovery coach, how did you really step into that to say, okay, now I'm going to make a career out of this?
Yeah. So I remember I was actually on maternity leave. And I, at that point, had been recovered for probably a year and a half, almost 2 years. And I was like, I don't want to go back to my job. Like, I don't want to go back to my job. I have worked in healthcare since I was 16. Like, I wanted something different. And I'd had many conversations, and I was like, there's got to be like sort of a greater purpose for me. And it was just so wild because my grandmother, who is lovely and very religious, and I'm not so much religious myself, but she would always say, Shannon, you're a healer, and someday you're going to heal a lot of people. And I like never thought that meant anything, right? I just thought she thought that I was going to like get into church and like, I don't know.
Thanks, Grandma. Thanks for believing in me.
Right. And so I remember thinking so many times when I struggled, because also like postpartum was really hard for me, but I was thinking like, I used to struggle with this stuff. And I remember feeling so alone and feeling like there was no hope, and that recovery was something that would never happen for me. And I had such a beautiful experience of moving through it and then seeing all of the things that I could do and how I could live my life so freely and peacefully and actually love life again. And I just thought, I've got to do something with this. And so I started like a blog very initially in the beginning. And then I just started, when Instagram started doing these reels, I was like, all right, I'm going to show people that they're not alone. So instead of telling people, people tell people all the time, which is helpful, you're not alone, but for people to actually see it. And I love to share like the nitty gritty, the embarrassing stuff, the stuff that people think like nobody else deals with this. I love to show people like, you're not crazy, you're not broken, there's nothing wrong with you. And like, you can move through this and you can live the life that you want and deserve to live. And it's not the one that you used to live, right? Because we always want to go back to like who we were before anxiety came into the picture. But you don't need to go back to that person. That person has nothing for you anymore. It's about really like, yes, what you're struggling with is really, really hard. And these lessons feel like they're just really awful at times. These things will give you gifts, whether it's, of course, the way that I use it now, it might not be, but they will give you gifts. And it's really hard to see it, of course, when you're living it. But
it's so hard.
I just really,
because no one really can convince you of it when you're so in it, right? You have to be able to step out of it momentarily and shift to a different vantage point to be able to even see your own experience, which takes courage and willingness and desire and capacity. It makes me think, I worked years ago with a young girl who had a ton of anxiety, and she described it as being in the middle of a tornado. And I love the description. I like visuals. I think it was a very accurate description. And I said, look, I'm not here to deny the tornado. If that's what you're experiencing, that's real for you. This is, your embodiment. This is the swirliness that comes out of nowhere. It has strong power. I said, but let's see if you can be the weatherman commentating on the tornado. right? Because I
Yeah.
think people are told like, oh, just deny the tornado, right? Just push it down, deny, resist, ignore, judge, all the things. But it's like, no, it's here. Let's honor and acknowledge what's here, but let's just shift the vantage point. And in that vantage point, you can be able to have clear perspective. You can see things that when you're in the middle of it, you can't see, but when you're looking at it with some distance, it gives you a little bit greater clarity, which then hopefully can lead to the access of the tools, the compassion, the ability to harness the part of our brain that can help us when we're so in it. Otherwise, it just takes over.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. That's so good. It is. It is like being in a tornado, but yeah, being able to step outside of that and really have, a different perspective. It's tough, but it's so, so worth it. And, I just, the big reason why I started what I do now is because I want people to know and believe that they really do have everything that they need in them to heal and to overcome and to stop looking outward so much. And I know you're desperate, you want to feel better. And like the big solutions really to what you're struggling with come from within you. And you don't need all these other things and people and solutions and tools, and so much of what is going to help you to
we kind of overcomplicate
within you.
We kind of overcomplicate things, don't we?
Yeah, we're good at that. We're humans.
So I've got a question before we wrap up. So now that you've got a daughter, we were talking a few minutes before we hit record. So your daughter's 4. So how are you setting the stage for knowing what she likely will experience as being a human, and also having some of the epigenetics of, what's in her DNA?
Yeah.
And, as a mom, because I've got 2 teenage daughters, and I've very consciously parented the way that, from the level of awareness of my growth and healing from the things that kept me really stuck. And now having teenagers, I can tell you parenting from that place has been successful.
Yeah.
And what I see my teenagers able to do that I was nowhere near able to do. So what does that look like for you? Because I also know there's a lot of parenting practices that activate anxiety rather than help anxiety. And I just want to give space to the parenting piece for a few moments. And I don't know, well, you've already been able to experience with your daughter, but I have some things to share, but I'm curious, what's your experience or take on that so far?
Yeah, there's so much to it, right? And like, I'm obviously a newer mom. Amelia will be 4 very soon. And it is every day. You're like, how do I approach this? And, of course, I have a lot in the back of my mind of what I saw as a kid and how I want to do things differently. And so a big piece for me with her is, sometimes she'll say, Mama, I'm scared. I haven't been here before. And, it's so funny that she is able to acknowledge that and be aware.
She has the language and awareness. Yeah.
Yeah. Which is amazing. And so I'll look at her and just say, Amelia, it's perfectly okay to feel scared. I get scared of places that I haven't been to before. Sometimes mommy gets scared too, but we're together and we'll go in and it'll be less scary when you do this, after the first time you do it. And we've recently, it's so funny. She is such a daredevil, I think, because I am such an adventurous person. I have always been. And so when I, began struggling, that was really hard for me because I felt like it took away so much of who I was. Because I am the person, like, I will, hike incredible mountains. I will, I'll do anything, like heights, anything scary. Yeah. I love it. And so we do all of this stuff with her, my husband and I, and we recently went to the lake, and it was her first time out in a big lake, and she wanted to go for a kayak ride. And I said, great, let's do it. And so we got out to this island, and she was like, okay, like, let's just swim back. And I was like, we can't just swim back. That's not cute, but no. So we get back in the kayak and she was like, well, Mama, I want to swim at least in the middle of the lake. Can I swim in the middle of the lake? Like she was so like, that would be so cool. And I was like, all right, like we'll paddle to the middle of the lake. So we get into the middle of the lake and she looks at me and she is filled with so much hesitation. I know, I can sense that she's scared. And she looked at me, she's like, Mama, I don't know anymore. I don't think I can do this, or I don't think I want to do this. And I was like, okay, we'll keep paddling and you let me know if you want to. And we paddled, maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. And she looked at me and she's like, okay, Mama, I want to jump. And I was like, okay. So we stopped. She got up on the side of the kayak and jumped into the middle of the lake and just started swimming. And, there's so much beauty in letting kids feel what they're feeling and then to make a decision. And that for me, I feel like if I had known that, like as a kid too, but moving through my recovery journey, I can feel this and I can make a decision. I can make, the decision that I actually want to make while feeling scared, while feeling anxious, would have,
it's
so
huge.
Powerful.
And to recognize also your stuff might come up and how you can allow your stuff to come up without projecting that onto her.
Yeah, for sure.
When I was on that plane, as I told you about, I realized about 5 hours into the 5.5 hour delay that I should call my mom because she's a worrier. And that I should tell her we haven't taken off yet, let alone we're not landing yet in 30 minutes. And I called and she had said, oh my God, first, like, why are you calling? Like you should be in the air, right? And when I explained the situation, she goes, oh my God, you must be so frustrated. That was a pretty generic statement to make. I'm on a plane, sitting on a tarmac for 5 hours. Yeah, that was like a pretty innocuous statement. But in that moment of awareness, I recognized that, how old was I? 36. Wow. That's how my mom was feeling. I didn't have to take on that emotion.
Yeah.
And something in my awareness, I was able to like separate out. I wondered how much I was internalizing her anxiety as mine. And I think because I just come from this retreat and had this major breakthrough and like I was in that space. And I actually said to her, I said, actually, Mom, it is a frustrating situation and I'm actually fine.
Yeah.
And, so whether it was breaking the tie from like my adult child to my adult parent, right? But even as a parent, like you said, giving my daughters the space to feel what they feel unapologetically. I think the absolute worst thing any parent could ever say is calm down. Like the last thing anyone's ever going to do when you say calm down is actually calm down. And, I used to give I used to say to my daughters when they were sad, many parents would otherwise think I was like giving in to the sadness. It's like, no, me acknowledging their sadness is not creating the sadness. The sadness was already here. They're not manipulating me. They're looking for validation that what they're feeling is normal. Yeah. And so when I could be able to say to them, yeah, this is really hard. I see that you're really scared. Come here, let me give you a hug. So many parents I work with are like, oh, that my kid's manipulating me, or my kid is acting out. And I'll say, well, what do you think your kid is needing? Oh, well, they're needing attention, but they're doing it in a negative way. Okay, so what do you think your kid is needing? Well, they're needing attention, but what would happen if you just gave them the attention and validated that what they're feeling is real and valid for what they're feeling? Like it builds safety, security, and trust. And it helps them normalize that what they're feeling is human. Yeah. So it's so powerful. I could talk about parenting stuff all day long because it's so much easier said than done. But when we recognize if this is in our genetics, this is part of our DNA because, transgenerational trauma or family history of certain patterns, we have an opportunity and not just to like do what we say, but actually walk the walk and talk the talk.
Right. For sure. I think I'm so glad that you shared that because now I'm thinking like, ooh, you're going to come on my podcast and we're going to chat about that because that is a whole conversation.
It's a whole conversation. And I have so much to share about that because I healed a lot of my own anxiety and fears and challenges early on in my motherhood. And I'm so glad that I did. And I look at my daughters who are now 16 and 18 and I'm kind of amazed by them. And I'm jealous of them because I wish I have had what they have at 16 and 18 and the courage. And I have to recognize, well, they were raised by a mother who was healed from a lot of these traumas. And I can't fault my mother for having her traumas and doing the best that she could with where she was, still stuck in them. But to see it like in front of me tangibly, of the shift of not having that be overly debilitating as a way of life.
Yeah. It's beautiful when you start to break those, generational traumas and you heal. And that's the work. I'm very honest and open. Like, I didn't have a child until I felt like I'm healed, and I can come from a place where I know that I'm going to approach this the way that I wish I had this opportunity when I was a kid. So,
and let me tell you, it works. It works.
Yeah.
Shannon, I love this conversation. There's so much in here, and I can only imagine that people listening just feel validated in their own experience as well. At least I hope so. How can people find you? What's the best way to connect?
Yeah. So my platform is A Healthy Push, because I believe you obviously have to push yourself, but I always want people to do it in a healthy, manageable way. So you can find me on Instagram. That's primarily where I am. And also my website's ahealthypush.com.
Wonderful. Well, Shannon, thank you so much for so vulnerably sharing your journey and for doing the work that you're doing to help so many others. I think these conversations need to be more and more normalized, because it's real. And even if it's small, it feels significant for people. So thank you so much. And I look forward to connecting with you further.
Yeah, thank you so much. I really enjoyed this conversation.
All right, everyone, take care and be well.
To continue your journey forward, find Jory Rose on Facebook and Instagram to become part of her growing community. You can also gain access to her meditations, books, online classes, or to sign up for an upcoming retreat. Visit her at joryrose.com. That's JOREEROSE.com.